Hi, I'm Kôhei Obara, and I survived film school.
Just barely.
Barely. Toilets don't flush.
Oh, that's a callback. I love it.
The one thing I really remember was when we had, the first sort of introduction session for all, the classmates, and we had like a reels played
Real
to
day.
each
Yeah,
other.
real day.
Yeah,
Oh,
you were
was
the
I doing it then?
moderator. Yeah, you were the moderator that time.
Ah, okay. I wasn't sure if I had started yet because I didn't do it forever. But like, yeah, when I started doing it, I loved that part.
Yeah, that was fun. And I had this weird sort of reel because I had an animation background, and I played a bunch of these anime, like Japanese anime opening themes that I produced back in Japan. And people were cheering, but I was just like, this is just so irrelevant to what people are doing. So I was so nervous. But I remember you were so, what do you call it? Um, kind and nice and generous in
I
moderating my session.
I do. I think I remember that because I remember like thinking like, oh yeah, this is not anywhere close to what you'll be doing at AFI. But it was
Exactly.
so. But like in that screening, because it's so long and it becomes, like just draining, you need those like bursts of energy or something different or something like really professional, like that you brought. So I thought that was cool. And just like having that background coming in, then I also thought, why are you in film school? You like, you look very accomplished.
Yeah. Well, lots of things that I did want to learn. So you get to
Yeah.
go to AFI.
Well, that's kind of like the theme that I like to start at, like, is why, especially with you, because you have you had a poli sci degree right before AFI.
Yeah. I had a poli sci degree. Well, everything in Japan. I graduated from a university in Japan, but like the things that you learn at college and the things that you do in the real world is rarely connected. It's like it's
Yeah.
nobody does the things that they learn in college, so it wasn't that much of an unusual thing. But yeah, I went to political science, majored in political science, and learned American politics. Uh,
Wow. Could you teach us? Actually, could you teach our politicians about American politics? Because they have no
but
idea.
my my graduation thesis paper was about the rate. Was it the Clinton era's administration's missile defense system? And the only reason I chose it was because it was back in the Reagan presidency. It was called the Star Wars. What is it? Star Wars? What
It was called the Star
defense?
Wars program, I think. Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
exactly,
Star Wars
exactly.
defense system. Yeah.
That was the only thing that got me.
You're like, ooh.
It's like Star Wars, yeah. Why not do something related to things that I
Well,
really
it shows
love?
that, yeah, that you had an affinity to film back then.
Exactly. Yeah.
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 So wait,
So,
talk about that pivot. How do you decide to go to film school after having that degree? Is it
so yeah, I always liked Hollywood films because I spent 5 years in New York when I was a kid. My father worked for an airline company, and we were transitioned. He was transitioned over to the New York offices, so I spent there for 5 years, and I got my English there, um, and got in love with films. When I came back to Japan, I was watching anime and Hollywood films. I never got into Japanese cinema, which is a shame. So I learned more about Japanese cinema afterwards. But so after graduating from university, I went to interview for a bunch of movie, film, and TV and animation companies. And the one company that accepted me was this company called Toei Animation. And they did Dragon Balls, like
they're
Sailor
big.
Moon.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the only company that accepted me, which I think
Well, the only
was
one that accepted you was the big one.
luckily, but it was a very, very, very low paid job. Anyways, didn't say that. But yeah, so I started my career in film and animation at Toei Animation directly after graduating college. and then I spent 5 years there, and I still had this like feeling that I wanted to learn more about Hollywood or Western, more Western style filmmaking, and I wanted to pivot more into creative producing as well. So that made me kind of learn more about what's out there. And AFI was one film school that I was really interested in. So got into applying and got accepted. So that was my way going into
Right.
AFI.
So what would, well, I guess you had been working in it, even though it was animation. I'm always curious, especially with producers, because there are so many different kinds of producers and different ways you can go with a career in producing. It's probably the most diverse, of our disciplines of as far as where people end up. But I'm always curious, like what people think before they come to AFI, what the producer is. Like, what was your definition of a producer?
The understanding of producing before AFI was quite different from what I actually learned there.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine, especially if you were expecting a creative producing emphasis, because especially in that first year at AFI, it's a lot of physical producing, right?
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh my. The cycle films. Oh man. Oh man. It was tough. But it was a really good crash course of knowing how to fail, I think. Everybody says about the first year of AFI is kind of like everybody's expecting you to mess things up. And it's rare to have something go really well. And if you go really well, you're actually not learning anything. So it's
Yeah,
better to do things wrong and be scolded or be regulated in a way, disciplined in many ways. So it was tough.
yeah. I always say like the worst thing that can happen to a fellow is to do really well on their cycle one, because then they start going, oh, this is easy, like I got this, and you're just like waiting for reality to smack him in the face, the other shoe to drop, because it's gonna happen. But yeah, you don't want to peak in cycle one.
Exactly. It comes sooner or later though. Like if you do well in cycle one, there's always a pit in cycle two, and then
Yep.
you try to pick yourself up and do cycle three. Um, and it's usual to fail in cycle one. You have lower expectations for cycle two and cycle three. So, like no matter how you do in the first two cycles, I think at the end of cycle three, you get some sort of a sense of of a reality in making something. So I think it's a really good program.
Yeah. You also get, if you do too well on a cycle, you get the target on your back. There's the competitive nature, and it's not like AFI, it's built into AFI, it's just human nature, right? And yeah, everybody is very encouraging, they want you to do well, they just don't want you to do too well.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I'm trying to remember, so your class of 2012, who are some people that, like, that we see in the trades now, like who are the breakouts from your year?
I think the most notable producer right now is Denise Davis. Is
Oh,
in
she's your class, okay.
she's my class 2012.
I
So
see Denise all the time. Not all the time, but we have an alumni council of like 6 people, and she's on there. And yeah, of course she's doing well. And interestingly, I connected with someone else then from your class, because I didn't realize it was Denise. David Johnson. Do you remember him?
oh yeah. He's at Netflix now.
Yeah. So he came
Right.
by a few months ago and did like a talk with just the second year producers on working in documentaries at Netflix, to kind
Oh
of
cool.
expose them to like this is a career, because obviously, AFI does not emphasize documentaries. So he wanted to expose them. And I hadn't seen him in a long time, but I don't know if you remember him, but he is like a natural motivational speaker, and he has this
Yeah.
deep voice like this. And he just like it was like going to church. He was quoting all these like motivational books that he reads, and he talked about like he's up at like 4:30 in the morning so that he has time to write before his kids get up. And it's like it was great. Yeah, his energy
Yeah.
was awesome.
I think I had one lunch with him. back when I was working at Netflix. And yeah, he was always such a energetic guy who's so jolly all the
Yeah.
time. Um, yeah, I haven't spoke with him in quite a while, but
But you crossed over. You were both at Netflix at the same time.
we were, yeah. I think I joined Netflix like 6 months or 8 months before him, and just noticed a welcomes email that came out of him joining the company. I was like, oh, and I emailed him, texted him, and had a lunch when I had my business trip to Los Angeles.
Right. Oh, because you were at Netflix in Japan.
Yeah, in Tokyo.
Okay.
So I joined Netflix in January 2019. They relocated me from Los Angeles to Japan to work on anime content. So I was on creative side of producing anime originals for Netflix for 4.5 years. I recently left the company, but yeah, it was quite
Uh,
an interesting, exciting times there.
Yeah. All right. We'll talk about that. Yeah, towards the end, but I will go back to like your time at film school. So
Cool.
you come from animation, you come to AFI, New City. Well, yeah, is it New City? It was new to you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
What was the biggest like learning curve of that experience, that like of just arriving in LA and starting a school with all these new people?
Um, I think, uh, well, because I was in animation, I think live action, um, practical producing and filmmaking is like it's a complete 180, and it's a totally different view. And I had language barriers, so I think a lot of international students kind of struggle there. And getting a phone, buying a car, and getting
Mm.
used to the life. I think
Yeah.
all international students can relate to that.
Right. So how was your English then? Because your English is impeccable. But how
Thank
was it
you.
back then?
It was terrible.
Really?
Terrible, terrible. You do have to get like there's a Japanese English learning test that's called TOEFL, and you have to have a certain grade to actually apply to AFI. But it doesn't actually mean anything to you because it's just a paper test and a listening test. So when you get to the real world and talk to people, interact, it's completely different. Also, you have to have this sort of lingo or the languages and technical and creative sort of um, vocabulary to get along with all these different people from different backgrounds. And that was like it's like a triple,
Yeah.
quadruple.
Well, and then
Uh,
there's also the lingo and the specific words that you use in the film industry, right?
yeah, it's totally different, and I think like whatever you learn, whether it being AFI or somewhere else, I think everything's really based on how they do it in that region or place. So all the rules on filming, like there's a 30-mile range and where you can film at any given time. That sort of rule is also, you have to have that sort of sense of the geography and all. So getting used to that is also like an extra effort for all international students, I think.
Yeah. So talk about that part of the challenge of how it adds. I mean, look, people come here, speak fluent English, and they still have that, insecurity, that imposter syndrome when you're in this like prestigious arts school. And then now you have to deal with that part, right? So, and a big part of AFI is having to talk and having to communicate, especially as the producer, right? You're the leader. Can you talk about like how challenging that was and how you overcame that part?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of communication. Once you get really along with the people you work with, especially for the cycles, the you kind of um, take the burden off your shoulders in terms of what your responsibilities are. It's all kind of like a team effort. So you kind of help out each other in doing stuff, especially for like producing, like a producer like me. I don't know where things are. I don't know what, I don't know where Torrance is or Glendale is until I kind of look it up at that time. So it- doing location scouting is also a big burden for me that time. But just you just talk to your cinematographer or your director who knows better than yourself, and then you kind of get a sense of what works, what not. So just having a candid conversation with your teammates, I think helps. It goes a long way
Yeah.
um, to get used to things. So it's just a matter of communication.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, yeah, you're right. And then a big part of it is probably just being honest about it and just be like, no one likes to say this, but just saying like, hey, I don't know. I don't know where Torrance is. Like, help me out. Yeah. You know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh,
And so many, like, you were coming from Japan, but very few people come from LA to come to AFI, right? We're about almost 50% international. And then there's everyone else coming from all over the United States. There's very few. So, you know, you were in the same boat as most of the people here.
Absolutely. So there were a few Asians, people from Asia, a lot from Europe, and a lot more from outside of Los Angeles. So that's a place, that's the point that you resonate with um, all the classmates you have. So it's like I don't know how to go here, there. You want to go location scouting together, or go to look for a sound stage, uh, find equipment and all these things. I think it's just like finding a common ground to make yourself like useful for the projects you're working on, or for your projects that you're helping your classmates for. So yeah.
What do you remember the point where, if it ever happened, where you felt like, oh, okay, now I get it. Like I feel comfortable now here.
Mine was at the end of cycle three. Um, my cycle one was a disaster. I would say I love, I hold it near and dear, both cycle one and cycle two. But cycle one was really a tough time for me. Very happy for how it ended up, but it was just a struggle. Cycle two was since I
Now,
was
wait,
week seven.
sorry. Was cycle one such a struggle because of what you were talking about of the language and learning the layout?
Yeah, yeah.
Not a collaboration issue.
It wasn't a collaboration issue. I think we're pretty much uh, yeah, working along um, with each other pretty well. But the locations that we liked, it was a house that somebody else owned, and we rented the house for 3 days, I think. But the owner wasn't necessarily happy with how we were running the set. So on a certain day, he asked to cut short the production time for I think like 2 hours, and I felt really sorry for the production, and I had to explain that, and then um, wrap up the second day I think early, and that was like a really big time loss for the director for sure. Um, uh, I think the company move was a hassle because it was in the middle of the day, but we needed to schedule at that time. But I think we lost another 30 to 45 minutes traveling to one place to another. All these logistics was just really a tough thing to do to get through. Cycle two was also something that we've tried it. We did something um, try to do something adventurous. So we picked up a script from one of the screenwriting fellows that had this kind of a forced perspective featuring script that had like a tiny guy and a normal sized lady, um, talking to each other. And it was a very exciting project for both the director and the cinematographer, because the cinematographer really wanted to do that in a sort of a set location. So he rented out a cheap soundstage and went there and did it. The the force perspective really worked well, so that was kind of an achievement. But the everything else, production design had to struggle because we had to negotiate the prices for the soundstage to enable that sort of a shooting uh, environment. And the entire sort of the film kind of struggled because of that. It was a good film, but we were torn apart at the narrative workshop, so it was a tough time going through that. But Cycle 3 was a really exciting and an achievement that we got a lot of praise within the teams. So a lot of fun stuff. It was tough, but I think we got to know how to do things better. It was a gradual sort of a trajectory to grow, and by the end of cycle 3 was, I think, um, the time I kind of realized I think I got it. We can get to the next stage.
I mean, that honestly, that's exactly how it should be. You know, that's, I feel like if I had an ideal model for a fellow going through it, it's exactly what you said. Cycle 1, you should be a disaster, learn as much as you can. Cycle 2, a little bit in the middle. And cycle 3, you should be like, yes, now I get it. And cycle 3, that must have been extra satisfying because that was the producer initiated cycle, right? So it was your idea.
The director came up with the idea, but I totally agreed with how he wanted to do it. So um, it was a musical, which I think was quite rare. So it was kind of a 60s style musical that the director composed as well, recorded at a very cheap sound recording studio, brought it over and blasted the music while shooting. So it was a quite interesting and exciting sort of a project for a producer as well to make it happen in a way. So that all went very smooth. The production designer had to struggle a lot because we had to paint a lot of stuff in backdrops. But otherwise, I think overall it went really well.
That's ambitious too. Yeah, there are not a lot of musicals done here. And then what was your thesis experience?
The thesis was also oh, it was really good. I worked with uh, his Tommy, who's from Hawaii, but has a Japanese lineage as well. We decided to dig into the history of Japanese Americans. Did a period piece in the 1940s about the Japanese internment camps during the Second World War. So it was a very sort of a topic very close to my lineage, and wanted to dig into the history of it all. So we did a lot of research and forced ourselves to shoot in Manzanar as well. So we did a whole sort of travel and a stay over for a day to go all the way up to the desert and come back. So
Wow.
logistically, I think it was
Yeah.
really challenging. So
Yeah.
I really liked pushing the boundaries of physical producing, and I enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah, it sounds like every single one of your projects, you were like really kind of pushing, like what you're like adding to your skill set each time, like learning, like intentionally doing something different to learn something new.
Everything just dumped everything on a producer. I think that's why I just like, okay. I didn't know how tough it was going
And
to
you're
be.
like,
I was
I'll
just like,
just
okay,
figure it out, right?
yeah.
That just shows that nobody knows anything anywhere. It's like, well, then that's how you know something is because you did it once, and then they'll throw something new at you. What was your darkest day, your darkest moment, your all is lost moment, as you would say in development at AFI at film school? And then how did you overcome that? And you don't have to name any names
um,
if you don't want to.
um, this isn't kind of clean, but the first cycle, um, there was one day when at the house that we were renting, part of the reason why the owner wasn't happy was, well, he didn't figure it out until maybe he didn't even figure it out all the way through. But the the toilet overflowed as of the use of it all.
From the crew, from your crew?
Yeah.
Okay, now you have to name names. Who did it?
And it was the UPM who came out laughing so hard, um, coming up to me and saying, like, I went to the bathroom and it doesn't flush. And it's just overflow. The water's overflowing. Ha ha ha. And it was like, of all people, you and the UPM come up to me laughing at the disasters that's happening on my show. That was the absolute low point of all things. Consider that
Wow.
happened at AFI.
And it happened early, but you're right. Like that must have been, that's like a little shocking to think like what a producer is in your head when you see the Academy Awards and stuff. And then your first time doing it, physical producing. And it's like, oh, toilet's overrunning. And now it's your problem to figure out. Yeah.
So yeah, we added a porta potty in the backyard right after that happened. So used up some savings to do that. And until then, we had to fix the toilet and clean it up and everything. Uh, but um, but I mean things happen, I guess. It's just like,
I mean, it's the perfect metaphor for the business, right?
right. Shit happens.
I wanted you to say it, not me.
Unintended. I'm the king of dad jokes, so I guess I'll go all the way.
I love it. Are you a dad?
Yes. I have a 5-year-old daughter who's turning 6 tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Oh wow! Happy
Yes.
birthday! Congratulations.
Thank you.
I didn't know.
Yeah, best thing I produced.
Yeah. Wow, that's good. I love that.
Co-produced. Yeah.
So then the other thing I like to hear about is expectations of, you're at AFI, and because this is what I deal with now in the alumni office, is like, so what do you want? Like when you're at AFI, learning and making movies, what were you thinking? Oh, this is what I want to do when I graduate. And then what did you expect you would be doing? Like, did you have a vision for your career post AFI?
I did not. Um, the big struggle, I think, post AFI was that I think I wasn't necessarily prepared enough about how to get into the industry after film school. Um, it's not about, I don't think it's necessarily about the connections or the alumni or having mentors or anything. I just didn't know how how a producer could establish himself or herself in this sort of world.
Hmm.
Um, but looking back at it, I mean, nobody can teach you that necessarily, especially a profession like producers. You're not necessarily like there isn't a set way to to become a producer. You can call yourself a producer. That's probably why producer credits are so uh, I don't know, leveraged in a way in the industry. So there isn't sort of a set sort of skill set you need to have to call yourself a producer. So I wouldn't say something must have it could have happened better or in a different way. But I think for producers, it's really hard to find your ground uh, to get to the things that you really want to do. And and in most cases, you don't necessarily know what you want, kind of the what you need and what you want, sort of a cliche, but I think you just have to get into it first and figure out what you really want to do later.
Yeah, that's very well said. And it's, yeah, I'm getting to know that more and more as I talk to, recent graduates, and then the more recent alumni. I hear that same thing. And it's specifically in the disciplines of producing and directing. And directing, it's like more like, okay, they do know what they want to do. They want to direct, but it's like, what do you do after you graduate? You don't just go fill out an application to direct something at Netflix. Yeah. So, and then producing is just wide open, where do I start? So let's talk about that. Like what, now that you can look back on this, in hindsight, what were those, moments or people that you met or something that led to that first break?
Uh, I don't know if I've necessarily broke,
Well,
but
I'm looking at your
yeah,
resume and I know that you worked at Disney, right?
yeah,
Wasn't right after AFI, but it was like your first real job after AFI.
yeah, yeah. After AFI, I was freelancing and doing production coordination work for mainly commercials that are set up in Japan and shooting in Los Angeles.
Hmm.
So dealing with Japanese clients and running around securing locations and logistics for commercials that are funded by Japanese agencies. So
So obviously that's leveraging like your connection to Japan, right? But then
right,
also using what you learned at AFI, physical producing.
yeah, yeah. Also, I did some translation and interpretation gigs as well on the side, so that I can use some downtime, earning some money as well. And I did that for I think 3 years or so, um, until uh, 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 an independent producer that I got introduced by um, meeting a few people in the industry hit me up and asked if I was interested to join Disney to work on a kind of a production management or coordination job. And I immediately said yes and joined. And after that, I did uh, short form animation and live action content.
Wait, so the,
Um,
the job that they were offering you for at Disney was a full-time job?
it was a full time job, yes.
Oh, nice.
It was a kind of a new team that they were forming for like, small size productions. So I think I was kind of lucky, but it all kind of connected through people that I went to see and had coffee with. So you just can sustain your life doing things that you're good at, I think, um, what you can leverage using language skills and the things that you learned or you have background or prior knowledge about until and then in the meantime you just meet people and talk to people. It's not like you're really trying to mush out a job out of them, but it's more or less kind of like getting to know people and have your face shown to in a lot of places
How do you do
until
that? That is the thing that's, again, hard to teach, but it is so important, right? So how did you go about reaching out to people? These were people like you were start creating these relationships, right? How did you go about like opening those and getting them to have coffee with you?
um, that was through the internship sort of job hunting phase. So I went through the AFI people to get some connections, sent out a bunch of introduction letters, and applied to a bunch of internships during the AFI times. And one of them were a creative executive at Nickelodeon. And then he met with me for like half an hour, and then he gave me two contacts, two producers who had connections with Nickelodeon working on their shows, and then the two people were generous enough to meet with me at coffees like once in like 3 months. It was really not. I didn't think it was going anywhere, but it's just like showing yourself and getting coffee with the people. It's not like I think I was clearly looking for an opportunity to get more experience to work at those places. It's never those positions are never open
Yeah.
when you're looking for them. So they always say there is no sort of openings, but they're happy to have like a conversation and to know new people. So you just like stick with that
Yeah.
and don't be too aggressive, and then wait until the time comes.
So in the, I know I'm going to get granular here, but like in those coffee meetings, are you kind of just asking their like to talk about their experience and their advice? Are you making it clear that you're looking for work? Like, how do those casual loaded coffee meetings go?
I just went with, I think it's just best to go with flow. If you can ask a bunch of questions, I think it's great to ask questions. It's better to have more questions from your end, um, so that they can know how interested you are about the person and the person's career. So looking the person up prior to the coffee, and knowing what they've done in the past, like say 10 years. Um, but you don't force yourself to ask the questions that you plan ahead, because the conversation goes in any direction. So you just follow along with the flow. And if you get to ask questions, that's great. If you end the meeting beforehand, or before you can get to the meaty part of the conversation, you just say, "Can we meet again?" That would be another good reason to set up a time. So I think it's just like you just don't rush it too much,
Yeah.
um, and getting to know the person is, I think, the best.
That's very good advice. It's almost it should be obvious, I always tell the advice I give them is just like just be normal, just have a conversation. And the easiest way to frame it is just like to ask, what they're, they know that you just graduated and you're just starting your career. So like, what did you do to get to where you are? Because I admire, your career and I studied it. Like you said, I'm a big like do the research person too. Yeah. So everything you said totally makes sense. And it's obvious. And yet it's like a light bulb moment when you tell someone, they're like, oh,
Really? Yeah.
yeah,
Mm.
just be normal, be normal. Okay. So you're meeting these people, and then that leads to someone saying, there's this opening at Disney.
Yeah.
Okay. So then you do Disney for 3 years.
3.5 years. Yeah.
And then I always say, like, once you get that first job, and you tell me if I'm wrong, then you're good, because that's where you're going to hear about all the other jobs first.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, but you have to. I really. I don't necessarily feel like I did a great job looking for the next step at the time. I was contacted by the Netflix recruiters, so it wasn't like me necessarily actively looking for the next step or the next job. Um, so I
Well, that's
kind of
even
regret
better.
that,
If
but
they're coming after you, you're doing something right.
yeah, yeah, that was good. But I think it's really hard. It's because it's endless in a way. You get a job, that's great. You learn about it. You kind of get used to it in like 6 or 9 months time, and then you really get creative on how you can do the job better. And then you try to climb the ladders, but all big companies always have layoffs and change of strategies, and really strategic people, or very savvy people, do tend to really look ahead and find their ways to go to the places that they can do what they really want to do from there, and then job hop in a really good way, or in a timely way. But that also is a really tough sort of task, doing it while you have a day job. So that's also kind of like the hustling part of climbing up the ladder. And I think I wasn't necessarily good at it, but fortunately somebody contacted me, so I got a next sort of career.
Yeah. And then at Netflix, you moved up. You were, let's see, senior producer, manager, director. Like and
Yeah,
that just happened because you did good work.
yeah. It was an interesting time at Netflix, because it was 2019, so they had their big break with original content, with House of Cards and Stranger Things, and 2016, 2017, and they were really into going global.
Mm.
So they wanted to expand their Japanese content slate. and have a content creative team in Japan on the ground, working with the creators there. So they really wanted to beef up their team. So, and also the tough part as a global company, they really needed somebody who's bilingual and understands the lingo in terms of the producing and the movie business vocabulary, but at the same time be very sort of local in a way, which is quite rare to find in Asia in general. So I think I was there at a good spot. And probably that was the reason why they relocated me back to Japan. I really had a good time there. It was quite exhilarating and a lot of volume. So yeah, um, I think I started as a manager. It was a senior producer and then a manager. It's kind of the same thing, just changed the title because of some restructures. But then I was promoted to director 3 years in my tenure.
So your run there ended this year, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
what? Well, what's the story? What happened?
Everybody says you only need one yes to make one project, and you can have like 100 no's. Just felt like I do want to be on the person who says the yes, uh, or avoids to say no, try to make things happen in the best way possible, because I think any story can happen in any sort of way, in any sort of budget. And as long as you have the time and effort and the passion to work on something, I think I would rather be on that side to try to struggle and make something that's meaningful for yourself than continuously saying no to people who are very, very passionate in their projects.
Yeah. Yeah, I had never thought of it about it like that, but you're right. That's the job, right? It's and you want to yeah, I mean, you seem like the type of person, you have a lot of empathy and you are very collaborative. You want to say yes to people and you just can't. And yeah. Did you get to say yes to? Did you get to like launch something? What was your most proud moment of Netflix?
Um, yeah, I've got a bunch of shows that I really love, hold near and dear. Some of the shows that are coming out are uh, um, I wouldn't say ironically, but coincidentally, launching after I left Netflix. um,
Well, the animation
what-
process is long, right? So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, but they gracefully kept, uh, you know, they recognized me in the show's credits, which is great. One of the shows is a samurai zombie uh, a period piece of a series that's based off of a classic PlayStation 2 video game from Capcom. It's called Onimusha, and we got the rights for the likeness of Toshiro Mifune from the old
Wow.
Kurosawa films,
Yeah, that's
and
incredible.
right, and then a supervising director of being Takashi Miike of 13 Assassins and some of the classic
Yeah.
samurai films. So it's a kind of a what do you call it? Passion project for me. Loving um, Japanese cinema, classic cinema.
That must have been
Um,
incredible to be able to do work on those.
yeah, I think it's a pretty good show. A 3D CGI animation show that's launching in the 2nd of November. And then later in that month, I helped seeding and putting together the pipeline for a show called Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. It's a show that,
Is
yeah,
that
Edgar Wright is promoting
I
heavily
literally
right
just
now.
watched the trailer today.
Oh yeah, you did.
And it has the whole cast from from the movie, the live action movie. That's incredible. You're part of that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We worked on getting the rights, licensing the rights from Universal right after we started at Netflix. So it took like 2.5 years to get it going, and had one of the prestigious animation studios in Japan, Science Saru, work on the show. I think it got together pretty well. So really excited for that launch as well.
Wow, that's so cool. yeah, I literally just watched the trailer, but I follow Edgar on Instagram, so I know he's been talking about it, and that's so exciting. And that must have been so much work to deal with another studio, right?
Yeah. But it wasn't as much, I think, as a creative executive at a network. It's more about making sure that there aren't any clogs on either end at the studio, at the production house and the studio. So just making sure that there aren't any like traffic jams in approving stuff or the creative direction. So the heavy lifting was on the front end, making sure that the studio in the US knows how to communicate with a studio in Japan that's very auteur driven.
Yeah.
So making sure that the checkpoints are there and the timeline is set right was the biggest part. But everything else, I think the hard work was all done with the animators down on the ground and Universal, who has went through a whole learning curve of knowing how to do animation, much less anime. So
Right.
that
Yeah. It's
was
not just
a
animation,
good
it's
one.
anime. Yeah.
Yeah,
How did you get to work with Edgar?
not really. I did got hop on a call for a couple times, but it was a quite rare sort of appearance. They were always he was always connected with the showrunners, so every single note or comment went through them. And we communicated with the showrunner and Universal. And the main sort of task was making sure that the studio in Japan, Saru, was understanding the creative direction correctly. So it was just mediator, like the
Yeah.
traffic jam clearer.
So many questions about that world, but I feel like you need to come and maybe come to AFI and do a talk about working in animation, because I've noticed, we don't talk about that at all, but it is storytelling. And the few instances, because I get to do the like the Harold Lloyd Master seminars now, most of them, I moderate them, and
Wow.
I've always been a big fan of Pixar films, and so like I've done 3 Pixar films now, just because I love them and I think they're great. They're like the masters of storytelling. And every time there's a huge response from the fellows. Like there are a lot of people. Then they like come out of the closet and they're like, oh yeah, I want to work in animation. I was like, oh, cool. So I think that if you came and talked about it, especially at that level and doing a really cool show like that, like we'd get a good response.
Yeah, I'm really interested in sort of spreading the word about how to get into animation too. I think I was very fortunate to work at Disney. They were all really tiny projects, nothing compared to what Disney Animation Studio, and also
Oh, what you did at Disney was animation also.
it was animation and live
Oh,
action. So yeah, I
cool.
did like TV interstitials for Disney Junior and Disney Channel.
Mhm.
So it was kind of like uh, the Disney princesses had uh, pets and they went to a magical kingdom inside of a palace and they nurtured friendship and friendship and hearts and friendship and everything. Um, that was kind of for the 3 to 5 years olds, called the Palace Pets, and that was an amazing sort of experience. I loved working on kids shows, and some other show for 7 to 9 year olds. Um, so that was exciting. And I did sort of like DIY short snippets of videos that were for kids and moms to do crafts on a weekday, a weekend, and things like that.
That's fun. Okay, I don't want to take up too much of your time, especially you got a big birthday party to plan for tomorrow. Uh, but I'll wrap it up with this couple last questions that connect back to film school. So, what is something, or did it ever happen in your career? And you've had a long, illustrious career, very big companies, where your AFI training you actually utilized?
and all the details of how to produce a film, like how to get the logistics done and everything. I think more than that, there's this feeling of okay, you went through this whole crash course of filmmaking for 2.5 years. You must be good at doing something. I think that sort of like feeling the self-confidence part is the biggest sort of treasure you get um, from going to AFI or a film school. And that kind of like it might not help you in a short term, like getting an entry level job wouldn't be something that you can expect from go immediately after graduating from a film school, maybe, which is very unfortunate. But I think like 5 years in, 10 years in, when you're actually doing something that's meaningful to you, I think it's always based off of what you've learned or how you interacted with people, your friends and colleagues at your at a school that puts you in the same place and the same level. It's more about collaboration more so than talking with upper people or lower people or above the line, below the line. It doesn't matter. It's more about how collaborative you can be. And that's something that you can learn from going to a film school like AFI.
Yeah. I know. I feel like sometimes this turns into like it's a sales pitch for AFI. It's really, I know, I'm too ingrained. I say AFI. I need to start saying film school, film school, film school. Okay. So, what is something that you didn't learn at film school that you think that you should have learned or you wish you would have learned?
Graduating a film school, I think it's really hard to get a job. To make a living is just the tough part. I think there are uh, but it's also kind of like depending on your personality as well, because you just really have to be nimble and be able to sell yourself or get yourself out there to socialize, and make sure that you can connect with people that matter to you or your profession. I think that especially like a really down to the ground school like AFI, it doesn't necessarily give you the luxury to network enough or socialize enough or spread your wings and um, enlarge your sort of circle of of communication. So I think that it's a double-edged sword with regards to being really in the weeds of getting to know how to produce stuff or make stuff. The other side of it is it's just too we've been too busy getting to know people.
Yeah.
Um, so I
Yeah.
wish
No,
that
it's
there
so,
is a balance there.
no, I know. I know. I mean, yeah, it's the blessing and the curse. It's like it's so intense, this program, but it doesn't afford you any time to do anything other than what the program is. So then I guess it is, if you were in charge of the producing program, would you make that more part of the curriculum, say like second half of the second year as you're getting ready to leave, more about like how do you network and actual networking events and things like that, and how do you get that first job?
Yeah, absolutely. If there's a way to learn that a little bit more. Also, if there's kind of a like an internship program during you're there, while you're there.
There
Um,
there was not when you were here?
there was, but I didn't necessarily get one through it. I did have a chance to intern for a few days at the AFM,
Yeah, we
which
still
is
do that.
great.
Yeah.
That is also a very good experience you can get. Uh, if there is a way to do a longer sort of period for like 3 to 6 months might be too long, but a longer period to have an opportunity to intern for companies to just not like necessarily directly getting a job after that, but opening up the opportunities might be I think would be great.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I encourage that like a lot, the internships, especially in your second year, and then like if you're still enrolled, that like summer after your second year, when you can still take an internship, because those
Yeah.
are the ones that can actually turn into jobs, because it's
Mhm.
like now you finish the internship. If you do a good job and there's an opportunity, it's like, hey, I'm done with school now, I can work. But yeah,
And
it's
then,
that. Go ahead,
sorry.
sorry.
And on top of that, I think uh, there, if there is kind of um, sort of a not a lecture, but sort of a way to um, uh, level up the sort of engagement with international students, maybe more. I think that would be a great sort of a leap, because having more than half of the students being coming from overseas, the tough part of them with them is, like, including myself, we just get there with a student visa, and right after that you can go for a 1 year OPT. But after that, you just there's a very slim chance to get an entry level job because as an international student, because I mean, if they were to hire somebody, they need to support them through their visa application, and that costs money. And
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not necessarily the best answer for international students to stay in Los Angeles to work in the industry. Maybe it's better to go back to Japan or wherever they come from, which is eventually what how I got my career going, I think. But at the same time, everybody's kind of wishing to get more hands-on experience working for a practical um, environment with as a job. It's really hard for them to imagine what their next steps would be. So uh, getting in the weeds of producing something in Los Angeles or in the United States and learning that, and then all of a sudden you graduate, you need to go back and kind of relearn the whole process of making films in their own countries is called kind of like a redundant process. So I think that if there's a way to kind of guide people um, more, I think those sort of what do you call it, diverse voices can be heard better.
Yeah, I do not disagree with that. And it's that's probably one of the biggest challenges. Because we're so international, so there's so many more of those fellows that are dealing with that. And yeah, that 1 year OPT, it's like it's a ticking clock and it goes so fast, and it creates so much anxiety. And you have to do to get work within your discipline. It has to be producing related and so many rules. And yeah, we do have to focus on that more. And I think a big thing we can do is just talk to more alumni and hear about how they did it. What did you do when you left? And just hear all the different ways you can go about it. Some of them it's out of their control. They're going for those what is it, O1 visa, which the
Yeah,
extraordinary artist. And it's like you can't control that. You have to get press and you have to win awards, and so yeah, I
yeah,
feel that one. And I'm always I'm out of my league talking to them about that, because I'm always never clear on what all the rules are. So then I bring in the registrar, but yeah, it's tough. But I think bringing in more people to talk about their experience would be great.
yeah,
Which means I'm going to bring you in to talk about your experience, because I
yeah.
also want you to come talk about animation.